A long time ago, this area was home to a well-known blacksmith who had a shop selling handcrafted equipment. Up until the day his good fortune struck, giving him the opportunity to sell the weapons he had made to the kingdom of Cairo, giving him the chance to advance in status. After the war, the blacksmith was appointed a baron for his efforts, which was the start of the land and the father of the young master Roman. This youngster had just learned that he was the youngest son of the Dmitri clan. There was no martial arts world here. Roman asked questions that were known to everyone, which startled the butler a little and led him to believe that Roman was drug addicted. The butler then abruptly shifted the topic, telling the young master that today was the day of his blind date with the lady of the Lawrence family and that he should go ahead and get ready. However, Roman did not obey since he had something more important to accomplish, so he ordered the butler to lead him to see the oldest person in the neighborhood, explaining why Roman was sitting here. After hearing the old man's story, Roman started to understand a little bit. The old man's real name was Bak Jong-hyuk, and he had once been a martial arts master. After achieving his life's goal, he was prepared to die peacefully, but somehow he awoke in the body of this young man named Roman. There was a loud cry on the street, and a youngster was being thrashed in the middle of the road. The butler ran over to check on the boy and informed Roman that the men who attacked him were members of the Bloodfangs, a loan sharking group that operated across the Dmitri region. Perhaps the other youngster was being abused in this way because he had borrowed money and hadn't been able to repay it in time. Roman went straight to stop them. Although he was a nobleman, the Fangs considered Roman to be nothing. This made Roman a little annoyed and called Butler Hans over. Roman had not yet remembered the rules of this place, so he requested that Hans state the law to them. They couldn't beat the other boy like that, even though it may have been wrong for him to borrow money without paying. Also, those men's disrespect for the nobility cost them their lives. Roman understood, took up a branch, and swore that he would punish them right away. The Bloodfangs were not scared until Roman quickly killed a man. When the others saw it, they were horrified and rushed up to encircle Roman, which Roman welcomed. That astonished Hans and made him wonder if this person was indeed young Master Roman. When Roman awoke in this body, he was able to see the owner of the body's will. The kingdom of Cairo was at war, and the royal family required each clan to send a representative to join. Roman was chosen to represent this region. Roman killed himself because he was so afraid, but now things were different. As long as he could maintain good control over this body, he would live on his own. To everyone's fear, Roman slaughtered all the fang-wielding people. He then loudly read his name and commanded anyone who was angry to come find him at any time. With his unimaginable strength, Bak Jong-hyuk rose to the top of martial arts, defeating hundreds of thousands of opponents who flocked to challenge him. Despite living such a noble life, Roman felt a little dejected because he now had to deal with thugs on the street. Roman then instructed Hans to summon the guards to tidy up the case. Staring at this feeble body bored Roman. It was so weak that he needed to cultivate additional meridians quickly. At this time, the youngster who had been beaten came up and thanked Roman for saving him. However, Roman corrected that boy right away, saying that he didn't save anyone. He was only punishing those who dared to break the laws of the region, and he requested that boy to explain everything. The boy's parents needed money and turned to the Fangs for a loan. If they could sell their goods, they would be able to pay off the debt. Unfortunately, the Bloodfangs arrived and destroyed the boy's family's farm garden, leaving his parents with an enormous debt. In addition, the Bloodfangs also kidnapped the boy's sister. The boy got to his knees and begged Roman to save his sister. Then, for a brief moment, Roman stared the boy in the eyes, but Roman felt as though his next life would be tied to this kid. While this was happening, Flora, Roman's fiancée, was about to leave for the domain as well. She didn't really like it, but Flora's father had to propose this marriage in order to maintain hope for the instability of the clan. At least, Flora had originally planned to wed the second young master of the Dmitri family, but everything was ruined by that family's youngest son. Others saw Roman as a useless member of the clan who merely enjoyed his life, but Flora refused to accept that and was determined to make it obvious to Roman today. Roman agreed as soon as Flora finished speaking, which surprised Flora. Roman was aware of how others viewed him, so he assured Flora he would take full responsibility this time since it wouldn't matter if he was guilty of the annulment wedding anyhow. As Roman went to tell his father, Mr. Dmitri became furious and yelled at him. Mr. Dmitri was Roman's father, and even if everyone thought Roman was stupid, he had always worked to give Roman the best life possible, including arranging for Roman to get married to Flora so that Roman wouldn't have to be in a battle anymore. But now that it was finished, Roman would be obliged to get to the battlefield within the next 6 months. And as for the Bloodfangs, they were people that even Dmitri wouldn't dare touch, but Roman dared to poke at them. Therefore, Roman would have to deal with the consequences alone. Roman nodded quickly and left. Flora overheard the conversation and realized Roman was crazy before he even attempted to touch the Bloodfangs, meaning he would be pursued by them all across the kingdom. Flora suggested that Roman return home and ask his father for help. This irritated Roman a little since he wondered why he had to do that. Roman then turned to Lady Flora to remind her of who she was. A few moments before Roman completed dealing with the Bloodfangs, butler Hans alerted Roman that his fiancée was on her way, forcing Roman to dress up and apply perfume to block out the stench of blood in order to meet her. Roman had only recently arrived in this world, so having someone by his side only made him more bothersome. Thus, Roman wanted to call off the engagement without embarrassing her. Roman was planning to do that, but after talking to Flora, he realized that she didn't respect him, and as a result, Roman didn't need to respect her either. Roman reminded Flora one more time that from the moment he made the decision to annul the engagement, Flora no longer had the right to interfere with his decision. Roman said that going forward, no one was related to each other and turned to leave. That night, Roman's father somberly recounted to his wife how he had beaten Roman. Back when he was still a commoner, he had hit Roman frequently, but after becoming an aristocrat, he made a pledge to himself that he would never let his son endure something similar again. Liana tried to encourage her husband. As parents, even if they said they didn't care, they didn't want anything to happen to their child. Because the Bloodfangs were a well-known gang, Roman couldn't defeat them on his own, so Roman's father decided to enlist the assistance of Captain Jonathan. The next day, Roman groped on the street, and the butler Hans followed him, telling him to return home since groping on the street like this was too hazardous, and the Bloodfangs could come and take revenge on him at any time. Liana tried to encourage her husband. As parents, even if they said they didn't care, they didn't want anything to happen to their child. Because the Bloodfangs were a well-known gang, Roman couldn't defeat them on his own, so Roman's father decided to enlist the assistance of Captain Jonathan. The next day, Roman groped on the street, and the butler Hans followed him, telling him to return home since groping on the street like this was too hazardous, and the Bloodfangs could come and take revenge on him at any time. Roman smiled and showed something entertaining to Hans. The Bloodfangs gained reputation when they ruthlessly slaughtered their opponents. They may be scary, but that would only be noteworthy if they could make Roman tremble. Then Roman took Hans to a fancy restaurant, ordered a full table, and let Hans eat first before leaving because he had a problem. From this point forward, Roman would investigate this on his own because it was too dangerous for Hans to go with him. Roman told Hans that if he really was on his side, then Hans needed to pay attention to what he said. After that, Roman left. Over the previous few days, he had learned more information about the Fangs. Their strength was normal, but because they operated in groups, it was a little challenging to catch them all. They must be immobilized now for fear of repercussions if they failed to capture Roman. Today was the training day for the local guards. There were very few guards in town, so if they wanted revenge, now was the moment. The moment Roman entered the alley, the Bloodfangs sprung out to attack him. Hans instantly raced to call Captain Jonathan and begged him to go rescue the young master, but Roman didn't need 3 Bloodfangs to find him. With only a few moves, Roman had already murdered a man. The rest of them were pale all over. Roman's strength was beyond anything they had heard. Hans made an effort to convince Captain Jonathan that young Master Roman was the only one who went in search of the Bloodfangs, but they weren't convinced, laughing at the idea that someone as weak as young Master Roman would dare to go for the Bloodfangs. However, Hans was still trying to confirm what he said was true, and he had no reason to fool them. Jonathan remembered what the Lord had said. Because he had already spoken, Jonathan needed to gather his warriors to protect Roman. He let Hans lead the way, vowing that no one would try to hurt the young master as long as Jonathan was around. Despite the fact that Jonathan had just said that, he had his own ideas. If what Hans said was true, Roman would not have spared him at this point in time. Roman, who saw the Bloodfangs trembling in terror, simply grinned and pushed them to hurry up because he still had things to do. Those guys, who had already suffered enough humiliation, came up eager to exact revenge on their fallen companions. Roman evaded their swords and stabbed one in the hull while kicking the other away. Now that only one man was still alive, they couldn't even threaten him. Roman approached the last man and pushed a knife into his thigh as he threatened to make him answer all the questions because Roman wanted to know who their boss was. After acquiring the information, Roman returned to the restaurant, his entire body covered in blood, startling everyone inside. Roman walked right to the stall and requested a glass of Don's tears. According to the instructions given earlier by the person of the Bloodfang, this was their specific code that simply needed to be read correctly for him to be assigned the duty. Roman, however, had just finished decoding the code when the counter's head pulled a knife and yelled at people to assault him. Roman punched the counter chief in the face right away, and he also punched the others who rushed forward, causing swelling all over their eyes. The uninvolved people were too fast to leave the bar, scrambling to find the guards to stop Roman. Roman dealt with the 3 Bloodfangs in a flash, leaving the others to wonder if Roman was really as useless as said in the rumors. The finest skill in the martial arts world could level up his own strength just by utilizing his breath. Roman knew this secret extremely well. Therefore, Roman's strength had improved significantly in a short period of time, though not in comparison to his body previously. The other Bloodfangs rushed up to attack Roman once they realized he was alone, but Roman merely grinned because they were now nothing more to him than mosquitoes. The owner of the pub didn't awaken until after a while, and by then the place was a complete disaster. Roman stepped right up to the man and told him there were a few things he needed to know. It was only a few minutes before Captain Jonathan came, and he, too, was taken aback by what he saw. The guards discovered a man on the 2nd floor who stated that Roman had done everything and that he had now entered Lawant's territory. Roman tied the counter chief to a chair and began abusing him an hour before he awoke. This guy had 2 fingers chopped off by Roman but still had a firm mouth that refused to reveal. He was not afraid of anything and yelled that the Bloodfangs would avenge him. Just as Roman predicted, people who were willing to die for others in this way were frequently valued and possessed a great deal of vital information. Because this man was still quite stiff-throated, Roman had to use another psychological ploy. Roman noticed a picture next to the counter of a father standing next to his son. Roman smirked and told the man to speak out, or else he would try to kill the child in the photo. Roman recently found out some very intriguing information, including the fact that the majority of the Bloodfang's servants were not bad people but rather people who were heavily indebted. In order to keep these people in their service, the Bloodfangs did not hesitate to commit crimes, cornering the debtors' families until the bitter end so that they could become slaves. Roman cautioned that man to be cautious since what he had just said was not intended to intimidate, and he pledged under the name Dmitri that he would send men to discover and kill the son. Obviously, Roman granted each of them a second chance, but would that man conceal the Bloodfangs in order to dedicate his son or tell everything so that Roman could go deal with the Bloodfangs himself? The Bloodfang State Master was aware of the news in the meantime and had intended to improve the state's position by executing Roman, but now that Roman had eliminated a branch, this was so absurd that a useless person could do that. Roman, according to intelligence, just left Dmitri region this morning. Therefore, they assumed Roman had already acquired the state's information from the other branch and maybe was on his way here. The master instantly dispatched an army intent on killing Roman before Jonathan's guard arrived. Meanwhile, the Lawrence region was in trouble, as they were antagonizing with the Barco clan, which would eventually lead to war. The Lawrence family had always maintained a position in the kingdom, but now they were endangered by the Barco family's inability to compromise. If conflict broke out in any way, the other clans would come somewhat, so they were forced to prepare everything to battle those people. They also wanted their daughter to marry the second young master of the Dmitri family because, despite only being a minor family, they were also one of the richest families in the Northeast, and, as a result, no matter how much money the Barco family borrowed, they could never be as wealthy as the Dmitri family. Flora stood outside the room and heard everything. The marriage had been cancelled, so she couldn't see her father anymore. The guards immediately informed everyone that Jonathan had sent troops as soon as he heard of Roman's arrival and demanded that the Lawrences open the gates, but when they refused, he had to direct his men to break down the gate. Roman dragged a man into the center of the street while in the square, and no matter how much he pleaded with Roman to spare his life, Roman didn't care. The leader of the Bloodfang clan initially assumed that Roman was merely an ignorant aristocrat, and with his numerous soldiers and sharp weaponry, he believed that Roman would be in danger if he arrived here. However, Roman demonstrated the opposite. Roman killed every member of the Bloodfang state by himself, leaving just the leader. The leader was now terrified and begged Roman for mercy. Roman carried the man to the center of the square, but he begged Roman to spare him, saying he would do everything Roman requested as long as Roman spared him. Roman, however, punched the leader in the face and announced that he was the head of the Fang state, claiming that everyone must already be aware of how terrible these people were. They not only harmed the people of the Lawrence territory, but they also threatened the inhabitants of the Dmitri region. They used dirty ways to achieve their goals, even threatening to assassinate nobles. their crime was proved, and Roman had no cause to spare that leader's life. Roman promised to kill that man in front of the crowd, and just as Jonathan came, Roman executed that man. The soldiers told everyone the entire story and had just an hour earlier allowed Roman to enter the castle. However, the fact that Roman captured the Bloodfang state leader and executed him in front of everyone was absurd. Additionally, Roman made decisions on his own without consulting Lord Lawrence, so they couldn't ignore this. However, the Lord disagreed, believing that Roman's ability to deal with the vicious fangs on his own was amazing. He then gave the order for the guards to summon Roman to the conference room so that he could personally hear Roman recount what had happened. Lawrence did accompany Roman in order to skip some ceremonial issues, and Roman was instructed by Lawrence to get right to the point. While outside the conference room, Lady Flora was perplexed and called the guards to inquire as to why Roman had appeared in her father's room. Lawrence was irritated since Roman had no authority to execute anyone in the area. But Roman replied that he did it because he feared the Lord wouldn't be able to catch the leader, so Roman did it himself. Roman felt a little let down because he had helped Lawrence well and deserved a compliment rather than a reproach. Waiting until after Roman had left, Flora's father laughed, remarking that Roman was very manly and that, if Roman were to become Flora's future husband, he would surely make a big issue with this liver. The father then directed the butler to call in Flora, intending to tell her the entire thing personally. On his way back to Dmitri territory, Jonathan was still frightened that Baron Lawrence would furiously send troops after them, something Roman was confident wouldn't happen because, based on Lawrence's attitude, he still didn't realize his engagement with Flora had been annulled. Jonathan shivered as he heard. Roman had devised a great plan to avoid punishment before arriving in Lawrence territory. In fact, the person in front of Jonathan right now was nothing like young Master Roman at all. Baek Jong-hyuk had a difficult childhood because he was one of the 12 children of the heavenly demon who would eventually inherit him. However, the heavenly demon forced his children to fight one another for the right to inherit, so in order for his 12 brothers to inherit, they had to demonstrate their strength. The winner would then inherit everything. The heavenly demon didn't care if they died or not. If they all died, he just needed to give birth to others. The hardest time for Baek Jong-hyuk was during this time because, unlike other children who were loved by their parents, he was abandoned by his own father and sent to a world where only the powerful had the right to live. Returning to reality, Roman relaxed in the bathroom after landing in Dmitri territory. His body felt weary much easier in this body, but of course, in this world he experienced a lot of new things, the majority of which were related to bloodfangs. To eliminate them, Roman was prepared to kill everyone who dared to stand in his way without feeling bad. Because Roman had experienced this emotion many times in his past life, killing everyone who meant to target him. It was his life in his former life, and nothing would change even now that he was in Roman's body. However, he recognized a few things. His current strength was insufficient to reach the world. Therefore, if he continued to go out like this, he would be in danger. Roman had no idea what to do next. Someone abruptly appeared to tell him that the Lord wanted to see him. Jonathan had informed Lord Dmitri of all that had occurred in Lawrence's region and had received the unequivocal confirmation that young Master Roman had changed and was no longer the Roman they knew. Lord Dmitri had Roman as his own child and the only one who spent time with him. Back when he was still a civilian, Roman had been an obedient filial child, and for that reason, Lord Dmitri wanted to give Roman the best life he could so that the other children would no longer regard them as the underprivileged. However, when Roman got lost, the Lord was powerless to intervene. Lord Dmitri must also admit that a part of him had already given up hope in Roman. However, after hearing this from Jonathan, that hope began to burn again. He didn't care how Roman obtained the bloodfangs, as long as Roman did, he would assist him at all costs. At this time, Roman turned to see the Lord's expression. Roman could tell the Lord was excited about what he was about to reveal and that an accomplishment that exceeded his expectations would eventually come back to haunt him. Roman would have kept this a secret if it had happened previously, and he had learned a lesson throughout his childhood. If he made it clear that he was superior to others, they would be afraid and not dare to approach him. As confronted with the Lord's question, Roman did not hesitate but stated firmly that it was he who single-handedly exterminated the entire Fanged gang. Jonathan then escorted Roman to the domain's training school. When the captain arrived, everyone respectfully greeted him, not forgetting to gaze at Roman. They were perplexed as to why he had brought Roman here. Jonathan called everyone over and explained that beginning today, they would start sword training with young Master Roman and that anyone who wanted to participate first should simply walk up. This surprised everyone since how the heck did the captain want them to practice swordsmanship with an idiot? Lord Dmitri had a question regarding how Roman brought the bloodfangs down an hour earlier. Roman carefully considered his response and gave it in the most logical way so that he wouldn't be suspicious. Roman made up the story that he had been practicing swordsmanship in secret, using the excuse that he had been lost for so long, in an effort to convince his father that he too was able to do great things. However, the Lord was still skeptical. Even if Roman had learned sword magic, he could not reach the level required to wipe out the Bloodfang gang. Roman had a reason for this. He explained that the state worked mostly by usury and then threatening debtors, but the leader had all the authority. Thus, Roman only needed to take down their leader, and they would immediately break apart. It was an organization committed to harassing the disadvantaged, and Roman had previously been seen as simply a scrapper by others, so they didn't realize how powerful he was. That was why Roman took it upon himself to lure them and seize a batch. The subordinates, Roman claimed, would not avenge their leader because they were primarily his oppressors. The Lord was astounded by Roman's statements as well. Carefully preparing to carry out a very daring and decisive deed, he could not have anticipated his son growing up this much. The Lord then requested that Roman demonstrate the swordsmanship he had learned. No one dared to take on Roman while Jonathan waited so long. This was not because they were frightened of losing to Roman, but rather that if they won over Roman, they would be expelled from this area. Jonathan was also looking for a skillful opponent who could defeat Roman in order to both validate the young master's prowess and maintain the reputation of his knighthood. Jonathan sincerely wanted to try, but as a captain, he couldn't do that. As there was only one person who could manage this situation, Jonathan asked Chris to confront the young master. Chris was the knight's vice-captain, and the first time he encountered Roman was a year ago when Roman started a fight at the tavern that forced Chris to go there and bring Roman home. A drunken Roman smacked Chris in the face, but the slap did no damage. This convinced Chris that Roman had never trained. It was inconceivable that the Lord's son was so useless. Chris had full scorn for Roman from that moment on. Chris couldn't hide because the captain had already pressed him up, but before the combat began, Chris stated that when he fought, he did not give in to anyone, not even young Master Roman. Roman agreed with it, and the match officially began. Chris had intended to teach Roman a lesson during this practice match. Chris hurried up to Roman as soon as the match began to attack him. Chris's all-out slash swung forward, but how the hell Roman was able to catch it astounded everyone present. Chris hastily retrieved his sword and sprang back to reclaim his position. From the previous strike, the force of Roman's counterattack and Roman's defensive posture were flawless. Chris had not expected this situation, and he had no idea if Roman was lucky or not. But it didn't matter anymore because all he cared about in this match was knocking Roman out. Chris continued to lunge up and slash Roman with a vertical downward slash that Roman managed to dodge to the side. Chris pursued and slashed in the direction Roman dodged, but Roman was still able to dodge and counterattack Chris. Chris instantly moved behind Roman, thinking that from this perspective, this was a dead end that Roman would no longer be able to avoid. Nevertheless, Roman was still able to avoid, and from beneath, Roman plunged his sword, startling Chris. Chris was still able to dodge, but Roman had already cut a few hairs. Chris only realized this now because he had underestimated Roman's strength up until this point. From the defensive dodging to the counterattack, they had all been very powerful, and he now thought Roman could defeat all the Bloodfangs by himself. Chris had thoughts of losing, but he attempted to convince himself that his opponent was merely a simple-minded young master since, as vice-captain of the knighthood, he could not fail in front of everyone. Chris was still able to dodge, but Roman had already cut a few hairs. Chris only realized this now because he had underestimated Roman's strength up until this point. From the defensive dodging to the counterattack, they had all been very powerful, and he now thought Roman could defeat all the Bloodfangs by himself. Chris had thoughts of losing, but he attempted to convince himself that his opponent was merely a simple-minded young master since, as vice-captain of the knighthood, he could not fail in front of everyone. Roman sighed and waited until now, thinking that he had had enough time to warm up. Now that it was his turn to go first, Roman rushed toward Chris, who startled himself and quickly repelled Roman's attack while wondering how Roman could be so frighteningly quick. Roman didn't stop there, unleashing endless blows. Chris could only cuff his back and support the blows, unable to think about counterattacking in this situation. If things continued like this, Chris would be in danger, so he racked his brain for a solution, but Roman didn't give Chris time to think, instead delivering a slash that caused Chris to move back to get additional defense. Then Chris recognized that Roman's pursuit had exposed too many weaknesses, especially the area of his chest, which was utterly in danger. Chris rapidly pulled his sword directly into Roman's chest, then simply smiled and dodged to the side. It was all part of Roman's plan. He had purposefully revealed that weakness in order to entice Chris into attacking him, allowing him to respond. Chris missed that attack and lost momentum, while Roman was about to plunge his sword into Chris's head. Chris refused to accept defeat from such a useless young master. At this point, Chris's sword was emitting a lot of energy. Feeling something was off, Jonathan yelled for Chris to stop, but the move couldn't be undone. When the smoke cleared, Chris realized Roman was okay but had missed it earlier. At that point, Roman swung his sword and sent Chris away, declaring victory for himself. Chris, Jonathan's student, was the vice captain of the Knights due to his inherent talent. This was generally known to all since Chris had a 2-star aura Knight when he was young. According to rumors, Chris only needed to practice for 2 years to feel the effects of mana and 3.5 years to advance to the rank of 1-star Knight. Jonathan gave Chris a break while they were training, but Chris insisted on continuing with his master, and Jonathan was amazed by this because Chris had both natural talent and a strong drive and work ethic. Chris was a sword genius, no doubt about that, but young Master Roman, who everyone assumed to be merely a scrapper, had now thoroughly destroyed Chris. Lord Dimitri didn't comprehend what had just happened. It was evident that Jonathan had pronounced Chris the most exceptional 2-star aura Knight in the region. This Jonathan could not understand, considering Roman was still causing problems for others just a month ago. Furthermore, Roman's moves were too sharp. Jonathan was certain those moves would take years to master. Jonathan had no idea how to describe them. He could only think Roman was a sword genius. Roman focused his attention on Chris' name. After the match, he realized that Chris was indeed powerful and had the ability to eliminate the entire Bloodfang state by himself. With this level, Jonathan could explain why he was so proud of Chris. Perhaps everyone else's standard was the same, but Roman's was different. He thought Chris was still too weak to battle him, but the last move startled Roman a little. Roman was brought over at this moment, and the new lord, beaming with pride, called his son over. Jonathan was unable to explain why Roman had progressed so quickly and could only apologize to the lord for not being able to recognize the young master's actual talent. The lord had never been more proud. He wanted to offer Roman a well-deserved gift, so Roman instantly announced he wanted to join the army, despite the lord's belief that Roman did not want to go to war. But it wasn't that. Roman wanted to ask the lord's permission to allow himself absolute discretion in selecting his comrades, then he asked for another wish. Roman was brought over at this moment, and the new lord, beaming with pride, called his son over. Jonathan was unable to explain why Roman had progressed so quickly and could only apologize to the lord for not being able to recognize the young master's actual talent. The lord had never been more proud. He wanted to offer Roman a well-deserved gift, so Roman instantly announced he wanted to join the army, despite the lord's belief that Roman did not want to go to war. But it wasn't that. Roman wanted to ask the lord's permission to allow himself absolute discretion in selecting his comrades, then he asked for another wish. Chris awoke astonished when Jonathan requested him to teach Roman aura. This was the lord's order, so Jonathan couldn't refuse, but Chris still strongly refused. After losing to someone like Roman, Chris just wanted to dig a hole and get down, so Jonathan had to strike a deal with him. Jonathan stated that after Chris taught Roman about the aura, he would reveal all of the secrets to Chris. Rumors about Roman defeating the 2-star Knight circulated around the castle, but Roman didn't care because all he wanted to know was what aura was. According to the butler, it was a reference to how to manipulate mana. Mana? In the former world that Roman lived, there existed almost the same kind of energy, but it was used far more effectively. Standing in front of Chris, but Roman kept laughing, which irritated Chris so much that he could do nothing but immediately begin the lecture. The first was to define aura and describe how it differed from shamans' use of mana, which was stored in their magical spells, and knights' use of mana, which was stored throughout their bodies. Emperor Alexandro, the founder of this mana concept, discovered that keeping mana within his body strengthened him, whereas an aura was a projection of this reserve mana outside. The theory was true, but very few people actually succeeded in putting it into effect. Out of 1,000 people, only one could become an aura knight, whereas tens of thousands of others had a magician. As a result, it was critical to determine if he could integrate with mana or not. Aura knights must at least feel the mana. Chris did it in half a year, although the others required several years, owing to his natural ability. The basic theory was complete, and Roman wanted Chris to feel the mana as well. After Chris lost to Roman in the match, Chris believed that Roman was arrogant about his abilities, and Roman was mistaken in believing that it was simple to feel mana. It was what Chris thought, but Roman was different because he already knew how to use mana. Because of the experience from his previous life, Roman was able to store a very small amount of mana, but that was never enough for him. Because this was a different world, he couldn't rely on his previous life's experience indefinitely. Instead, he needed to cultivate a lot more and try to follow the customs of people in this world first. Chris walked about Roman, urging him to focus on his breathing and on feeling everything around him, and after he got acclimated to these things, he would feel the mana so that when he discharged the mana outside his body, he would become a one-star knight. Chris just turned around and noticed Roman's entire body lighting up. This clearly was launching aura, so Chris was really surprised by Roman's quick learning. Roman had just recognized that, as he had anticipated, the energy in this place was different from the energy he used in the martial arts. Whereas the energy in the martial arts was known as ki because it was dry but powerful, the energy in this place was pure lightness, which made it much easier to launch them outside. Roman, however, couldn't rely on their training program because it was too weak. He then spotted Chris, who had assumed Roman already knew how to launch mana, which was why he had lost to Roman. However, this was absurd because Chris had taken 10 years to advance to the rank of 2-star knight. Hearing this, Roman just smiled and asked Chris if he had ever wondered about his training methods. Blood Demon. A guy who in the past could destroy an entire sect in an instant. There was a battle that broke out between him and Roman in the past. You let him taste failure for the first time in his life, but that didn't stop him from backing down, instead using that humiliation as a stepping stone for himself to become even stronger. Chris was quite like the Blood Demon at that time when he threw away his personal pride and asked Roman to teach him how to become stronger. Roman currently has nothing to teach Chris, because if he did, Chris would have to completely throw away all the methods he has learned so far. So Roman wanted him to follow him and observe what he was about to do, in the next 6 months when Roman had to join the army. Observing how he fought each different enemy and became stronger, Chris automatically had the answer for himself. That night in Chris's room, he thought about what Roman said and felt that he was weak. Just because he was called a genius, Chris stopped trying and never learned from others how they practice. That's why every time he saw Roman he laughed at him. The next day Chris went to see Jonathan and asked to join the battlefield with his master. Chris was determined that he wanted to be even stronger. Jonathan didn't ask clearly what the reason was. He only knew that something had happened. But it must have been something very big for Chris to decide to follow Roman to the battlefield like that. Starting today, Chris is no longer a member of the Dimitri Knight team, but Jonathan still hopes that Chris will keep some dignity for his team. Next, he reminded Chris to be careful to protect Roman on the battlefield, then led Chris to get some secret weapons so he could survive. Meanwhile, the rumor that Roman single-handedly destroyed the Bloodfang gang has spread throughout the Dimitri region. The boy Kevin who was saved by Roman also heard this news. Ramna alone can handle an entire gang of bloody fangs. He is truly a strong person, not the trash in everyone's rumors. Kevin also wants to become such a person, someone strong enough to protect the people he loves, but how can he be stronger? Kevin walked and thought, then Roman appeared in front of the boy. Kevin immediately knelt down to thank Roman for his help. Thanks to him destroying the Bloodfangs, Kevin's family now lives much more peacefully. Roman has an offer for Kevin as long as Kevin swears loyalty. Roman promised to protect his family and give them a comfortable home without having to worry about anything else. Kevin agreed to immediately hit his head on the street and swear with his own blood. This reminded Roman of a crazy guy in the past. With just one command he can fight against an army of hundreds of people. He will never fall until he completes his mission. And this boy Kevin exudes the same aura as that guy. He really didn't waste his time coming here. Roman smirked and announced that starting today, Kevin would be his man. Roman took Kevin to Hans and let him live in his palace, so that Hans could instruct Kevin on what he needed to serve him. Roman then returned to the library to read more books related to this world, the path of an Halo Knight. To become an Aura Knight, the first thing they need is to be able to perform Aura, that is, a 1-star Aura Knight, and then to be promoted to a 2-star Aura Knight. You are forced to use your aura to cut even steel. The level of the Aura Knight depends on the power of the aura they can exude. Among the top 10 knights of the kingdom, not everyone can reach the 1st star level. Roman has confirmed that the strength of a 2-star knight, Chris, is quite normal, so even Jonathan, a 3-star knight, is probably only equal to a second-rate fighter. Currently in the world there are only 12 people who have achieved the 6-star level, and those people are treated like royalty regardless of race or nationality. What about magicians? They are people who are considered half human, half god, a slow-burning bomb that can cause disaster wherever they go. Magic is a concept that did not exist in the previous world of martial arts. Roman. Now Roman has determined what he should do next. He doesn't know when Roman will face danger. Living in this Dimitri area is boring. Of course, Roman will never sit in one place and enjoy peace like that. Danger can come at any time, so you have to prepare carefully. It will be much more interesting than the martial arts world. Roman smirked. The next day Hans led Roman to an old warehouse. This is the place where Roman and his father used to live. It is very strictly protected, so no one can enter here. A suitable place for Roman to practice. Roman always turns to remind Hans. From next week you will practice here without food or anything. Just don't let other people in here unless your people are in danger. Hans understood and left while Roman went to practice. Up until now Roman has only stored a small amount of mana in his body, but in order to be able to use magic, the first thing he needs to do is remove all impurities from his body. This body is so promiscuous that removing all impurities is quite difficult at first, but Roman still has to try to regain his strength to be able to live in this world. A week later, Lord Lawrence brought his daughter Flora here. Because Roman was busy, they were forced to wait. Lord Lawrence already suspected that Flora had annulled the engagement, which made him very angry. As Flora knew, the Barco family was preparing to wage war against them, and intermarriage with the Dimitri family was inevitable for them to win this battle. Maybe if they only fought against the Barco family alone, they could still win, but this is different. Other families are also aiming at the Lawrence territory, so the new lord is forced to intermarry with the Dimitri family. Hans informed Roman, but Roman kept them waiting from morning until evening and still did not come out. Lord Lawrence still tried to sit and wait. He was forced to let this marriage take place in order to save his domain, but even so, this was too much. An annoyed Lawrence went off to find Lord Dimitri himself. Lawrence rushed into the room to blame. Lord Dimitri reminded them that the person they needed to meet was his son Roman, not him, and that the marriage was cancelled because of Flora, not because of Roman. On the day Flora came here, Roman came to report the annulment. Even a 3-year-old child could realize that the problem was Flora. Roman had already made up his mind, so he couldn't do anything more. Moreover, the Lawrence family is the one who needs this engagement, yet they dare to come here and blame him for having to wait only half a day. Lord Dimitri then told Lawrence some more stories. About a month ago the Barco family contacted him. They also requested a marriage with their family, not the Lawrence family, and if Lord Dimitri did so, the Barco family promised to give him a portion of the Lawrence family's territory after the invasion. Even so, Lord Dimitri still firmly refused the Barco family's request. The reason here is that Lord Dimitri already has enough power. Just because his eldest son likes Flora, he also turned to confront the Barco family. Only now did Lawrence realize his mistake. He was too hasty and now he doesn't know what to do to turn back now. Anyone looking in from the outside would see it as unworthy, but as long as Roman still has the Dimitri surname, his value will never change again. Flora remained silent when she heard Lord Dimitri's reproaches. Right now, she suddenly remembered her childhood days, when she went to the academy to study. It was a place where the children of nobles came to learn and build relationships. There lived a family so small that their value was still a question for the children of the Joel family. In a world where every child is born thinking they are a treasure given by God, but Joel is not. One day Joel made a small mistake. When he accidentally dropped the academy's flower vase, Joel was called into a meeting by their committee to punish him. Joel's father kept bowing his head and apologizing to them. At that time, looking at Joel, Flora only felt that it was so sad. But now that she thought about it, she found it ironic that her father was bowing his head and apologizing to Lord Dimitri just like at that time. Flora also knew her mistake and apologized to the Lord. Just at this moment, Roman's training will be discussed later. Now Roman wants to resolve the intermarriage problem with the Lawrence family first. Roman has also heard about the problem between the Lawrence family and the Barco family. The Dimitri family is a leg that the Lawrence family can rely on to maintain the family. At first, Roman also intended to help the Lawrence family overcome this situation. However, his thinking changed after the first day he met Flora. Everyone knew that he was the idiot of the Dimitri family. And Flora is the noble flower of the Lawrence family, so she probably doesn't want to marry an idiot, which is why Roman decided to cancel the marriage. This blunt statement made Mr. Lawrence speechless, so it was over and marrying the Dmitri family was the only way for him to keep his territory. And now it's broken and no one dares to confront the Barco family anymore. We have to be self-reliant and confront the Barco family with everything the Lawrence family has. No, it's still impossible. If the Dmitri family allied with the Barco family, then they wouldn't have any chance at least to prevent that from happening again. Lawrence bowed his head and reaffirmed to Lord Dmitri that he would not lease areas that did not belong to the Lawrence family. Although it was not a large amount of money, Mr. Lawrence still wanted to use it to somewhat atone for Lord Dmitri. His lordship also understood what Mr. Lawrence meant. As the head of the Dmitri family, he promised not to consider problems that would arise in the future, adding that he would spread the news that the marriage between the two families was cancelled due to personal issues. If that happens, his Dmitri family also pledges not to cooperate with the Barco family. After Lawrence and his son left, the Lord called Roman back and asked thoroughly what had happened in the past week. For a week Roman stayed in that warehouse, trying to purge all the impurities inside his body as Roman pushed all those impurities out. As a result, his body has changed, which is proof that Roman is now a completely different person than before. This was a bit difficult to explain to the Lord, so Roman used another reason, saying that the mana in his body could circulate more evenly than before. This startled the Lord. The mana circulation phenomenon only appeared in a few people, but his idiot son was able to do it. He felt that Roman was starting to go beyond his understanding, but even so it didn't change that he was his son. He hopes that if Roman has any trouble, just tell him, he will definitely support him with all his strength. After finishing work, Roman went out and saw Flora waiting for him, first apologizing for arbitrarily judging Roman. Next, she told him the special reason for her decision to annul the marriage, during a social gathering of the northeastern nobles. There she heard that Roman was a drug user, but now she was wrong. Flora knew absolutely nothing about Roman. Roman doesn't care that much, no matter what Flora does, it won't change his decision. That night Roman thought about what Flora said. Did the previous owner of this body use opium? He couldn't feel any drugs in his body except the drugs he took to end his life. Roman then asked Hans if he had ever witnessed him using drugs. Hans did not see this, he only saw that Roman had some strange symptoms about a month ago. It was at this time that Roman discovered some suspicious points, when a social party of nobles took place. The Barco family's eldest son Anthony was the host of the party. After the previous owner of this body returned, he decided to commit suicide. Now Roman understands what happened. There are a few things that bother Roman about the previous owner of this body. The first is the will he left behind. In that situation, he had to go to the battlefield in place of his two younger brothers, and he was too scared of the violent scenes on the battlefield. Next was the engagement with Lady Flora. Too many nobles chose to link the two families together to avoid war. There were so many unknowns that Roman was certain he didn't simply commit suicide out of fear of war. The time when Hans saw that the young master was unusual was also the time when the Lawrence and Dmitri families were preparing to discuss plans to marry each other. Roman is certain that the intermarriage of the two families will be a huge obstacle in his family's plan to take over the Lawrence region. And the easiest way to eliminate that problem is to prevent the two families from intermarrying. Surely Anthony targeted Roman, which is why he committed suicide. Hans then brought out a letter. A few days ago the Barco family sent an invitation here. But because Roman was still practicing at that time, Hans didn't have time to send it back to him. Ramna is a bit annoyed that these Barco guys don't care about your Dmitri family at all, so let's teach them a lesson. That party will take place in 2 weeks. Roman let the butler inform us that he will attend this party. The next day, Roman let Hans go and call Kevin to his place. Before entering Hanko's room, Hanko did not forget to remind Kevin not to be too surprised by his new appearance. Roman first asked about Kevin's recent condition. He is living very well thanks to Mr. Hanko's help. But Kevin is still very suspicious about what use he has here for his master. Roman smirked. What role did he play? If it was Kevin, he would have already planned it. Roman gave Kevin 3 ways for him to choose. The first is to give up being his sword if Kevin is afraid of blood or killing in exchange for being his limbs like Hanko. The second is to make a sword that is always by your side to protect you. And as a last resort, Roman threw Kevin a sword, asking him to cut his own hand, and if Kevin could endure the pain until the end, he will become stronger than anyone. Now which option will Kevin choose? Outside Dmitri Castle in a ruined house, it was the place where Kevin was born. Since he was a child, Kevin had to work to survive. But no matter how hard Kevin tries, there are still people who are always trying to take everything away from him. That's why Kevin always has the dream of becoming stronger. He doesn't know how to become stronger if he cuts his hand. But he still chose to become stronger. Kevin cut his hand. That night, seeing blood on the sword made Hans think Roman was injured, but it wasn't his blood. In the afternoon, when Kevin was about to use the sword to cut off his hand, Roman put Kevin into the illusion of actually cutting his hand, and he was able to endure it. 2 weeks before the party, 6 months before the war, there will be a lot to prepare. Roman laughed. The next day Kevin went to the training ground again with Roman. He planned to prepare to teach Kevin a method to enhance mana. Although it's a bit dangerous, I have to warn Kevin first. This is not a normal method but a mana enhancement technique that the crazy demon used. A very dangerous magic that corrodes the user's soul, allowing them to exert their power under extreme pain. Even when the user's limbs are severed, they never lose their reason. Crazy Ghost had been extremely useful to Roman in the past, and he was also the only person who could use this magic. If Kevin has the will and can endure the pain of cutting off his own hand, Roman has hope that he can learn this magic. But before learning Roman, he still had to remind Kevin many times. When this magic is performed, Kevin will suffer more pain than a normal cut. There was only one reason for Roman to teach Kevin this magic, because Kevin didn't know anything about mana control. If Kevin can control this magic, he will have the power to protect those around him. Kevin still doesn't quite understand why Roman trusts him so much. Even though Kevin swore loyalty to Roman, he could run away at any time. Roman just smirked and left, reminding Kevin to rest today and start practicing tomorrow. The reason why Roman trusted Kevin was because he remembered that the crazy ghost had asked this question before. And he never dared to betray him, because only when Kevin became stronger did he know how dangerous it was to betray Baek Jong-hyuk. The next day Roman started sword training for Kevin. He had to get used to the wooden sword and the sword strokes first. Chris sat next to him and yawned, not understanding why Roman would teach swordplay to someone who doesn't have any background at all. Moreover, Roman didn't teach Chris anything. It seemed like if he followed Roman, he would learn more things. But Roman treated Kree as if he didn't exist in this training ground, telling himself to wait a little longer. However, a few days later Roman still ignored Chris. Chris reached his limit and ran out to ask Roman directly. If Roman did that because Chris was rude at first, then Chris apologized one more time and asked Roman to teach him. This made Roman very angry, as he said from the beginning, Chris had to observe everything he said or taught. Because Kevin doesn't have any sword skills, Roman took the time to teach him like that. Chris is different, but he already has an opinion, so Roman should give in to it a little. Roman threw Chris a sword and asked him to fight Kevin. Roman claims that although Kevin is still young, he has taught Kevin the necessary things. Defeating Kevin is not easy, and if after this match Chris still feels that what he said is right, then Roman promises to personally teach him. Chris was very confident that there was no way he could lose to a newcomer like that. When the match started, Chris rushed to attack. Kevin blocked the first sword strike but could not block the subsequent kick. When the match started, a voice appeared in Kevin's head reminding him to defend forward, and sure enough, Chris attacked directly like Roman reminded him. Next, he reminded Kevin to take a step sideways and aimed at Kevin's chest when he was about to kick Kevin, but because Kevin slipped, Chris was able to kick Kevin. Roman immediately reminded Kevin to stand up and throw himself to the right. Kevin was startled and quickly followed the prompt. He actually dodged Chris's attack and then aimed for Chris's left chest. Kevin did exactly as Roman told him but still missed and was shot again by Chris. Just now Kevin discovered many loopholes in Chris's movements, but because Kevin swung his sword too slowly, he couldn't reach him. Roman continued to remind Kevin to block the attack from above, then jumped to the right to escape, but Kevin was still too slow and continued to take Chris's shot. Only now did Chris realize the difference. Kevin resisted his attacks much better than Chris thought. Roman also knew that Kevin was not Chris's opponent, because Kevin's body could not keep up with Roman's instructions, but Kevin felt more excited than ever and continued to stand up. First, the voice transmission reminded him, followed by reading the entire attack of a 2-star knight. Kevin knew that everything Roman mentioned was absolutely correct. The problem was that his body couldn't keep up with Roman's instructions. If Kevin's body could move better, he would have won against Chris a long time ago. Kevin continued to fight according to Roman's instructions, stepping back to avoid the attack and then taking advantage of Chris's loss of position to rush in pursuit. Even though he did a great job, Chris still punched him in the face. Chris started to sweat. What a strange situation this was. Chris used all his strength to defeat Kevin as quickly as possible, but Kevin always dodged the important blow and then took the opportunity to counterattack. Kevin was very tattered but still trying to stand. At this moment, there was certainty in Kevin's heart that Master Roman would forever be the master. From this moment on, no matter what order Roman gives Kevin, he will be willing to follow it. Although he may be weak now, his willpower must be stronger than ever, because only then can he become Roman's sword. Kevin continued to fight even though Chris was seriously injured. Kevin did not back down and just laughed and declared that he would fight to the end. This also made Chris angry, pulling out everything he had and rushing to attack Kevin. Kevin followed Roman's words and rushed forward to attack without even dodging. Chris was startled and quickly dodged, then Kevin pursued again. A feint attack made Chris pale, but in the end he was still able to defeat Kevin. Roman walked forward and carried Kevin back, as promised that starting tomorrow he would personally teach Chris. Returning to the room, Chris began to realize his mistake. He had lost the final attack with Kevin. He could only avoid that attack because he had experienced it once when fighting Roman. The next day Chris realized what he needed, silently watching Roman teach Kevin because he knew. Roman is also guiding me through my shortcomings until I learn everything about Roma. Chris is determined not to go anywhere. Exactly 1 week after the day Barco's party took place. A week before the party, the news that the Dmitri and Lawrence families had cancelled their marriage spread far and wide. According to the messenger from the Lawrence family, he took all the blame on himself so that Dmitri would not be criticized. This makes people think that he is trying to protect his daughter, not wanting to marry his golden leaves to an idiot. However, Lawrence decided to cancel the marriage when the war with the Barco family broke out, which proved that Dimitri's Roman son was worse than rumored. Meanwhile, at Barco's house, young Master Anthony smiled happily when he received the news. I didn't expect Roman to be so easy to manipulate. As expected, he was so stupid that Roman accepted to join the party. This makes him look forward to the party next week. On the day of the party, Hanko brought Roman a beautiful suit, but Roman was very hesitant about whether he really had to wear this outfit. According to Hanko, this is the first party Roman has attended since the rumor of annulment with the Lawrence family was spread. As a member of the Dmitri family, Roman cannot let himself be careless. Outside the carriage, Chris arrived first. Waiting for a long time without seeing Kevin arrive made him impatient. Why are you so slow? The young master will arrive before his subordinates. As soon as he finished, Kevin hurriedly ran over to apologize. He was still not used to wearing armor, because Kevin's body was quite small, so he had to choose forever in the smithy to find one that fit him. Looking at this appearance made Chris bored. Even though he knew that Kevin was the one being helped by the young master, Chris still couldn't believe that he almost lost to Kevin. Putting that aside for now, before moving, Chris reminded Kevin of the etiquette. The two of them are the entourage of young Master Roman, who is also the face of the knights of the entire Dmitri region. Kevin must not be rude but must be careful in everything he says. At the party, the members there heard that Roman was coming today. They also couldn't believe that Roman dared to appear at a party held by Barco, when Roman knew that Anthony was targeting Flora to steal his former fiancée. That made everyone laugh and think that he was indeed an idiot. If he was a smart person, he would have stuck with one of the two families. Right now, Roman entered the party, making everyone's eyes cross. He had changed so much since the last time they met. It can't be like that because in their eyes Roman used to be too short, but now he's much taller and more handsome. The Gribble girl quickly ran over to introduce herself to Roman. Roman smiled brightly in response. Before going to the party, he read the entire history of the families in the kingdom, so that the nobles there wouldn't consider him an idiot anymore. Now that he meets any family member, Roman knows clearly what their past business or family problems are like. This made them gasp in surprise. At this moment, Barco's butler came to tell young Master Anthony to invite Roman into his room. Meanwhile, outside the party, Kevin and Chris could only wait. The other knights also discovered that they were Roman's knights, and kept making sarcastic comments, which made Kevin very angry. On the first day Roman, the body's former owner, met Flora, he fell in love with her at first sight. Entering Anthony's room, he kept a very warm look at Roman. Of course he was surprised by Roman's changed appearance, but he didn't show any expression on his face. Roman looked over at the table and it looked like someone had just left here not long ago. He didn't know what this guy was planning, but if he liked Roman, he was as comfortable as possible. Roman smiled brightly and sat down to tell the story that he had spent a lot of money just to change himself without having to do anything too hard. Right now, Anthony brings up an issue in the past, when Roman had to choose between marrying the Lawrence family or the friendship between the two. There is a secret that only Roman and Anthony know, that Roman slept with his cousin Anthony in the warehouse. Anthony exclaimed that he couldn't believe that Roman was so elegant, even before his own wedding. Next was the mention of their previous promise. If Roman had agreed to attend this party and annul the marriage with the Lawrence family, then Roman would have agreed to Anthony's proposal so he could keep it a secret. For Roman. So next, it's time to discuss the marriage between the Dmitri family and the Barko family. Roman still didn't know what that promise was. Right now, a series of memories came flooding back. In the past, the body's previous owner betrayed Anthony and begged Lord Dmitri to let him marry Flora. Knowing that he couldn't stay away from Anthony forever, Roman strongly advised him to go to Barko's house in the hope of mending the relationship. At this time, Anthony introduced his cousin to Roman. After drinking with them, Roman opened his eyes and saw himself lying in bed with his cousin. Of course, Roman had no idea why he was here. Anthony then took Roman to talk privately, saying that he didn't care if Roman had an affair with anyone, but the Barko family lady couldn't ignore it. He gave Roman the choice. 1. He would reveal the whole truth. 2. Roman would be forced to marry the Barko family's lady to continue maintaining the relationship between the two families. Now that Roman remembers everything, if the marriage of the Dmitri family and the Lawrence family broke down just because Roman had an affair with someone else before the marriage, then the honor of the Dmitri family would definitely drop seriously. Roman seems unable to face his father's anger, nor can he let the secret out because he really loves Flora, which leads to the decision to commit suicide for peace of mind. Just looking back at that memory is enough to make Roman angry. The previous owner of this body was indeed a pathetic person who couldn't do anything. Anthony kept urging Roman to agree to the marriage. Roman just smirked and crossed his legs on the table to confirm once again. The Dmitri family never accepted this and left, asking permission from those at the party who had urgent business and needed to leave first. As soon as I walked out the door, I heard the sound of Kevin being beaten. Just now, when being teased by other family knights, Cree reminded Kevin to try to be patient, but the more he endured, the more they encroached. Moving closer to Kevin, he exhaled words to annoy him, thinking that Kevin was just claiming to be a knight and had no talent at all. Chris spoke up to remind them that the Barko knights could only use their words. They are still confident, even though they don't know if they can beat Chris or not, but for a kid like Kevin, just the ability to hold a sword is much better than this boy. Choosing a boy as a bodyguard is the reason why everyone calls the young master of the Dmitri family an idiot. This made Kevin very angry. He pushed his hand away from his head and asked him to take back what he had just exhaled. He immediately punched Kevin in the face. Chris also intended to draw his sword to cover the boy. But right now the Barko family is in conflict with the Dmitri family. If Chris causes trouble here, it's not okay and the entire Dmitri family will be involved in this problem. Kevin stood up and declared that he was a knight of the Dmitri family, and he did not want to fight with those thugs pretending to be knights. He rushed forward to attack Kevin, but just as Roman appeared to stop him, he immediately received a slap in the mouth. The knight was startled. This slap came so fast that he didn't have time to react. He wanted to snap, but every time he tried to do something, he got slapped again. Meanwhile, Anthony sat in the room still not understanding what happened. His conversation with Roman earlier mentioned the issue of responsibility with the Barko family. Even though he gave Roman a lot of things, Roman still ignored all of his suggestions. I think I've already been called a fool anyway, so it doesn't matter if I have one or two more names. Roman then reminded him that he should behave more reasonably. At least he had achieved his goal of preventing the Dmitri and Lawrence families from linking together, but he continued to bare his fangs and threaten Roman. This makes Roman rethink whether he should help the Lawrence family confront his family or not. Roman has researched the Barko family very carefully. Their strength only comes from their connections with other families, but when it comes to being strong in both military and finance, in this area there is only your Dmitri family. Anthony understood and agreed to stop this matter here, so that Roman would not turn around to help the Lawrence clan. But that's not what Anthony cares about. What's important is that Roman has really changed. From his face to his eyes, he exudes a terrifying aura to those facing him. At this time, the butler ran in to announce that the family knight was being aggressive towards Roman. On the street, the knight was slapped by Roman, begging him to forgive him this time, but Roman didn't care. Anthony quickly ran to blame Roman for being rude. Roman just smirked and walked closer to him. As he mentioned earlier, Anthony's attitude was the key for him to give in. This would be the last time Roman would repeat it. Anthony once again had to let Roman let him deal with his family's knight at will. Now, in front of so many nobles, the weak and ignorant Roman no longer existed. On the carriage ride back, Kevin repeatedly apologized to Roman, saying it was because of him that the young master was humiliated like that. Chris also felt very guilty. Dimitri's family's honor was trampled. Kevin was beaten and he couldn't do anything. Roman, on the other hand, is very good at being able to endure it like that. Sometimes being angry only makes things more serious. But this is not the answer that Roman wants, because in this northeast region, no one can touch the Dimitri family. Even if you have to be humiliated in front of someone, don't forget his face so that the residue of anger always boils and then one day give it all back to them. After returning to the Roman territory, Hanko brought information from the Dark Moon Group. Recently, the Barco family has had many unusual actions. Barco is a small family that has lived in the northeast for more than a decade. After a few members of the family worked for the central family, the family began to emerge as a force in the region. Just as Roman guessed, their military strength is not strong, it only comes mainly from the power they hold at the center. There are 2 empires and 6 kingdoms existing on the Salamander continent, of which Cairo is the weakest country. Their border runs along the mountain range dividing other kingdoms, which is why they have been the target of invasion over the years. Because it is so weak, Cairo has no other option than to cooperate with the central government to defend itself. Their central government holds supreme power across the continent. It is this system that has given the Barco family invisible power. Thanks to the government, the Barco family can borrow such a large amount of money. Roman is pretty sure this loan amount was invested in the Burj mercenary group. According to Hanko, the Barco family will probably attack the Lawrence family within the next half-month. Roman is now considering the promise, even though he promised Anthony not to participate in the war. However, the Barco family is still a threat that needs to be eliminated immediately. Although in this northeast region Dimitri is absolute, in other regions they are not much stronger than the Dimitri family. That's why Roman had the idea to restore the family's position now. When it was time to spend money, Roman went to see his father. Lucas, a mercenary with a tired appearance, walked back to the Dimitri area. After going to the blacksmith shop to repair all his equipment, he was about to go home to rest when he saw a notice board. Everyone gathered around to watch, unable to stop Lucas's curiosity from reaching out. This is a recruitment announcement and the salary is very high, however there is a condition attached: they only serve Roman and not anyone else. Lucas of course didn't want to serve an idiot. Seeing that made the old man next to him laugh and remind him. Roman is no longer the idiot he used to be. Not only does he fight against the Bloodfang Guild, he also treats everyone very well. Of course, at first no one believed it, but after hearing Kevin's story, it was different. Kevin, from a poor, weak kid, after a period of following Roman, became much stronger and more mature. After returning to Dimitri territory, Roman gave Kevin 3 days off. Resting is also a way to practice. Kevin has also been working hard during this time, so Roman let him return to his family to rest a bit. Take a rest. Kevin hasn't been able to do that for a long time. Life does not allow Kevin to rest. He has to work hard from morning to night just to earn a living. Thinking back, since following Roman, he had never visited his family once. Kevin had just left the room when Hanko arrived. He did not allow Kevin to return home in this condition. The young master prepared some nice clothes and a little money for Kevin to buy gifts for his family. Starting now every month Kevin will receive 30 silver coins. Kevin put on new clothes, bought a few loaves of bread and happily returned home. He couldn't believe that he could wear new clothes like this. Add to that the hot loaf of bread Kevin is holding, and my sister will surely be very happy. Because her dream is to enjoy a hot loaf of bread with cream cake inside. All of this is thanks to Roman. Kevin told himself to serve Roman, to be stronger, to be worthy of his sword name. After a while of traveling, Kevin arrived at his house. The scene before his eyes overwhelmed him as his parents happily sat and drank tea together. And Mary ran freely in the garden catching butterflies. Seeing Kevin return, everyone rushed to welcome him. Regarding this house, Hanko himself came here to provide a house for them to live in. It was said that it was an instruction from young Master Roman, which moved Kevin to tears. At this moment, Kevin's father discovered a bruise on Kevin's cheek and thought Roman had beaten him. Kevin insisted that this was not the case, then told his parents everything, and then his parents told other people. For a noble to dare to slaughter people from another region just to protect their own knights, this was the first time they truly saw a noble who cared for their people. In addition, there is the story of Roman providing a house for Kevin's family. who spread Kevin's family's story far and wide. That's why now when Roman recruits, there are many people who want to join him. Hearing these things made Lucas surprised, first about the story of the Bloodfang group, then about providing houses to his subordinates. The Roman that Lucas knows is not such a person, because 2 years ago Lucas himself saw Roman making a fuss in the casino when someone else cheated him out of money.